An MRI glory hole, a rose-budding pool drain, and the famous tanning bed scene. These are all iconic moments we will discuss in my full Final Destination timeline. Yes. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be discussing the full Final Destination timeline from Final Destination 1 to Final Destination Bloodlines. And now without further ado, let's begin. In 1968, Iris Kimball and her soon-to-be fiancé Paul attend the grand opening of the Skyview, a luxury club, and it suspiciously looks like that one tower in Drake's album cover, which means it's sinister. Now, the Skyview was completed months in advance, which may just be a problem, but whatever, we don't care because we go up to the sky deck to see Paul propose to Iris. But instead of being excited about securing the huzz, Iris actually gets a premonition. A premonition of a little boy with iPad baby level aggression throwing a penny off the building.
Fat ass.
Thus leading to the collapse of the entire building and the eventual death of everyone inside. Leaving Iris and this young unidentified child as the two survivors in eventual kills made by death. Who the f are you? This leads to Iris stepping into action mode, leading her to stopping the kid from throwing the penny, thus stopping the collapse. However, it does lead to a generational long revenge tour made by death. So, Iris, you really dropped the ball on this one. Anyways, let's move to 2000, where we join Sam Lawton and his co-workers on a bus to their company retreat. Cause they couldn't afford a plane ticket, I guess. Broke. Poor. And while the bus is crossing the North Bay Bridge in New York City, Sam gets a vision of the bridge collapsing due to high winds disrupting the construction. Feels like that should have been not even a problem. Now, all of his coworkers minus his girlfriend die in the accident, so when Sam comes to his senses, he gets everyone off the bus before the bus finally falls into the river. Yeah. Splish splash, that bus was taking a bath. The survivors we end up following include Candace, Isaac, Olivia, Nathan, Dennis, Peter, and Sam, yes, who Death is very excited to kill as he strokes his little tragedy boner. What the fuck? Why do I write this into my script? And the first to be voted off the island is Candace Hooper, who creates an evil sex position when she crunches her body in half during a gymnastics competition, which honestly looks like a Lego character dying in Lego Star Wars. And then we cut to Isaac, the professional pervert who is next on the chopping block, who is crushed by a Buddha statue during his acupuncture therapy session, which is honestly a great way of scaring off white people from colonizing Eastern spirituality. And now following these two freak accidents, the coroner with the drag name Mr. Bloodworth points out that Death has a little crush on these queens for making him look bad at his job, thus creating holes in reality. Bloodworth also offers a solution, which is pretty appetizing, this being that if you end up killing someone else, you can steal their remaining lifespan, thus escaping the cycle. And I can think of a couple people that it would actually be kind of helpful if you stole their remaining lifespan. The group takes note of this, but before they can actually put this to test, Olivia gets LASIK eye surgery because she's tired of being nerdy Megan Fox, and she just wants to be Megan Fox. However, this surgery does take a turn when the machine cuts her eye, and while in pain, she falls out the window, killing her on impact. And even after Olivia's absolutely insane death, the group still doesn't have the balls to kill a random stranger. So we move on to our next victim, this being Nathan, who manages a factory enduring a fight with an employee over him being a union-busting bootlicker. Due to him cutting the employee's hours, Nathan pushes this employee into a trap which Death had created for Nathan. Which is just flat out rude because you just killed your underpaid worker for having a clear disagreement with the way that you're handling this workplace. But because Nathan just donated a human life to Death, his lifespan has been extended because he stole the soul of a working class man. Nathan, I'm gonna grab you by the bush for a second here. You were on track to becoming the next Jeff Bezos. There's something deep and dark lurking deep inside of you, Nathan. And when he ends up breaking the good news to his friends, a wrench does fly into Dennis's head, killing him on impact. So the men get easy deaths, while the girls get to suffer. Death is a misogynist. Let's think about that. LASIK eye surgery and a gymnastics disaster that looks like that. And we haven't even spoken about the tanning bed scene. I know what you are, Death. You're a misogynist. And with the group falling apart, Peter gets the wonderful idea to kill Molly in order to steal her life, which is insane because, Peter, you could maybe redirect that anger to a person that if you killed could actually change the world, but instead you just want to kill some girl. And that some girl is also part of your friend group, making this insanely fucking messy. Men are scary and I too would choose the bear. Help me! Right. But while he's trying to kill an innocent woman, he ends up shooting FBI agent Block. But even after taking the life of someone else, Peter still tries to kill Molly for some weird reason, but is stopped when Sam turns Peter into a tasty little kebab. Thank you, Sam. You finally did something. Which, in theory, extends Sam's life due to him stealing the remaining lifespan from Peter, which he stole from Agent Block. A human centipede chain of life transfer, if you will. Fast forward to 2 weeks later, and we get introduced to a new group of people joining Death's little polycule. This group contains Alex Browning and his fellow classmates who are taking a plane to Paris. And once Alex steps foot on the plane, it obviously explodes. And if you didn't know that, then... sorry? But why are you watching this video? However, this ends up being just a premonition, so he wakes up while the plane is still being boarded. So he decides to cause some light chaos, and he gets himself kicked off the flight. With a few of his classmates and teachers right before the plane explodes. However, as Alex enters his psychic on a plane arc, we realize that Sam and Molly from Final Destination 5 are also on Flight 180, and they don't get off the flight. Instead, Molly is cut in half like a Kit Kat bar, and Sam is... well, Sam's burned alive. Yeah. But with the deaths of Sam and Molly, we can either believe that stealing someone else's life force is a hoax created by the woke left that is Mr. Bloodworth, or it didn't work because you cannot steal the lifespan of someone else if their current lifespan was also stolen. Yeah. Regardless, let's check in with Nathan, who has also stolen someone else's life. Here we see Nathan at a funeral for the impoverished worker he killed.
Steak sauce.
Isn't that great, guys? Isn't that great? And here we discover that that worker was actually going to die fairly soon because he has a blood vessel expanding in his brain like an evil brain boner. Nathan, of all the people you could have killed, you killed the working class man who was on the verge of dying anyways. And almost immediately after that reveal, the landing gear from Flight 180's explosion crashes through the building, crushing Nathan to death. Nathan, of all the people that you could have killed, you killed the one working class man in this entire movie, and on top of that, you killed the working class man who had days left on his life. So I guess stealing life isn't a hoax created by the woke left. These people were just really bad at killing people. Going back to Final Destination 1 though, the survivors we get are Todd, Terry, Valerie, Carter, Billy, Clear, and Sam, who return to their normal lives for 39 days until Death decides to send a little message to Alex, serial killer teenage girl style, by sending him a magazine cutout spelling the name Todd, one of the survivors of Flight 180. Now Todd's death isn't too glamorous. Basically, he slipped on water and got hanged by his retractable clothesline. But what makes this death a little unique is that the water used by Death to kill Todd retracts underneath the toilet, essentially covering Death's tracks. Which is odd, because why cover your tracks, Mr. Grim Reaper? What are the cops gonna do? Kill you? Touch you? And this movie also plays around with showing Death's silhouette, which, no shade, body is tea. But besides that, we don't see this body in any of the other movies, which was a good choice because that shadow was a little goofy for my taste. And Alex eventually teams up with Clear Rivers, which is an absolutely downright insane name, but they break into the morgue to play around with Todd's dead body, but are instead ambushed by Dr. Bloodworth, who reveals to them that in death, no one escapes. Cool statement, but are you not gonna exile these children for trying to fuck around with a dead body? Let's think about that for a second there. What's going on? And shifting to our next victim, Terry, who reheats Regina Georgia's nachos and gets hit by a bus.
And you can just drop fucking dead.
Which is something that Alex could have prevented because he saw a premonition of the bus in the window before the evil bus killed this diva. And yet he let her die. Think about that. And later that night, Alex sees a news report about the Flight 180 crash, and Alex realizes that the order of the deaths matched the order of who died in the explosion. With this knowledge, he realizes that the next to die is his teacher, Miss Luton, who he attempts to save her, but is stopped by the FBI, who believe that Alex is a little bit of a suspicious killer, which is fair because how did he know that the airplane was gonna explode? And while this takes place, Luton decides she's gonna have a nice cozy night in to probably read some fairy smut fan fiction, so she cooks up a coffee, which she changes to vodka because our girl has a problem. And then she ends up putting that in the mug, which ends up changing the temperature in the mug, which ends up leading to the mug being cracked, which ends up leading to the vodka spilling on the floor, which ends up leading to the vodka also spilling on the computer, which then leads to the computer sparking, lighting the vodka trail on fire, thus setting her kitchen on fire, which leads to the second explosion, which knocks her to the floor, and to hopefully clean up the blood all over her, she reaches for a cloth covering this massive array of knives. And alas, she grabs the cloth and the knives fall right into her stomach. Now, after the insane theatrics of this scene, Alex finally arrives, but is quickly stopped when another explosion takes place, thus killing Luton.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And after that tragic night of watching an underpaid teacher get killed for taking care of kids, we see Alex reconvene with his survivors to tell them that death is killing them in the order of their projected deaths. And this ends up triggering Carter's fear of death, thus leading him to go full vroom vroom mode, which triggers Alex's vision, this one being a train compressing a car.
We're afraid too, Carter, but we're not going to quit.
And cut to Carter parking on the train tracks because he has accepted death. But 5 seconds later, he realizes that life is worth living, but he cannot escape the car due to his seatbelt being jammed. Oh. However, at the last second, Alex rips the seatbelt and pulls Carter out of the car, thus escaping death a second time. Oh. And here is where we are introduced to rule number 3. When someone intervenes, death skips them and moves on to their next victim. Now the lucky runner-up seems to be Billy, who dies when the train crashes into the car, sending debris through Billy's head. Oh. That was cool. That was cool. Why did we let that happen? If I was there, I wouldn't have let that happen. And now this is where it gets a little bit crazy, because next on our list is Alex, the protagonist, the final boy, of course, who decides to hang out in a fully death-proofed cabin. Sounds a little bit like Final Destination Bloodlines, which seems like a good idea until he realizes that his little death prediction art piece was actually quite wrong. In fact, in his vision, he traded places with a classmate, which means that Clear Rivers is meant to die before him. Damn, his day one baddie is going to perish in a fiery flame. And with this in mind, Alex makes his way over to Clear, and he saves her just in time by grabbing a flailing electric member, which ends up almost killing him, thus meaning he has survived his own near-death experience. Or so we think. And 6 months later, and the survivors finally travel to Paris, and turns out this little trip to Paris might just be the end of the road for Alex. Oh. You're gonna die tonight. And luckily, Clear Rivers sees this and intervenes when he sees a bus barreling towards Alex, but tells him to move, thus saving his life. Thus moving the focus of death to the next person on the list. And now this is where we learn the catch to rule 3. If death skips everyone on the list, it rewinds, thus meaning Carter is next, who gets swept up off of his feet by a swinging street sign, launching him into what I can only assume is the Eiffel Tower. And with Carter dead, that means that Alex and Clear will be playing hot potato with Death until they finally reach their end. And they successfully stay alive for a couple of months until Alex is caught lacking when a brick falls onto his head. He survived 4 explosions and he was killed by the equivalent of sticking a fork in an outlet. Foolish white boy. We must do better. And with her hot potato game partner dead, Clear checks into an institution where there is no way that Death could possibly kill her, and she ends up hanging out in this institution for months. You know, this doesn't sound so bad. You get a studio apartment, you're unemployed, you have a little bit of a TV in your room. Diva, you won. You cheated Death. Along with the life update on Clear, Final Destination 2 gives us another update to rule number 1, this being that not only will Death return for people who reject his plans, but he will also target anybody who survives due to the ripple effects of those who cheated Death. So now I'm being punished for someone else saving my life. Right. This feels counterintuitive and insanely fucking rude. Imagine someone accidentally cures your cancer, and Death decides to inflate your balls with helium, thus killing you. Now, exactly a year after the Flight 180 crash, we get another disaster sponsored by Death. Today is May 13th, 2001. And Kimberly Corman blocks a highway on-ramp after seeing a vision of a log truck launching its thick turds into oncoming traffic. Knowing this, we get to meet a variety of people who were meant to die due to the Flight 180 crash. These include Rory Peters, who was meant to die in a theater collapse in Paris, but didn't go after seeing Carter get launched into space by a falling sign. Eugene Dix, tragic name by the way, much like Clear Rivers, who was also meant to have been stabbed by a student but was transferred schools when Luton died by way of paranormal stabbing. And Kimberly Corman, who should have been killed in a carjacking but got distracted by the TV when watching a news report about Todd's death. Well, that's drama. But these people all survived the crash thanks to Kimberly blocking the highway on-ramp. But this leads to Death switching up his methods, because when tying loose ends, Death works backwards. Thus meaning that because Kimberly and her friends died last in the vision, Death starts with them. Here, he throws a semi-truck into Kimberly's car, which explodes, killing all of her friends, but she survives because the sheriff pulls her out of the way. Maybe cops did one good thing today, guys. But with Kimberly saved, Death skips her and continues on its killing spree, shifting its focus to Evan, the lottery winner cool boy, who gets a ladder launched into his eyeball. Quick death for a man who'd be quick in bed. Because of this, Kimberly goes to get help from Clear Rivers, the last known survivor of the Flight 180 disaster. But while there, they realize that the order of the kills is in reverse and little Timmy is next. Yeah, we're gonna kill a kid. So we cut to little Timmy going to the dentist, where Tim tells his mom,
"If he gives me the gas and I wake up with my pants unbuttoned, we ain't paying."
What the fuck is happening? So after that freakish mommy's son dentist day, we see little Timmy getting flattened flat Stanley style by a glass pane after trying to play with some pigeons. And after this, Clear ends up taking Kimberly to Mr. Bloodworth, who I guess loves changing his theories because this time he states that only new life can defeat death. Are we joking? Because last time you said we had to kill someone. And now you're saying we just have to give birth to someone? Easy. Someone has to have sex right now. It's not gonna be me. And they take this information back to their fellow survivors, where they discover that there was a pregnant woman at the site of the crash named Isabella. And they decide if they can keep this lady alive long enough to debut her baby to Earth, they will survive. Which I can't lie, I'd be yanking that baby out of that young woman's vagina like it's a blind box baby special.
Congratulations. Who the hell are they? Oh, who is you?
I'm sorry, but like, if I don't yank it out now, I'm gonna die. Also, what the hell is this photo of this pregnant lady? Are we joking? Can we be a little bit nice? However, some of the group doesn't believe in this QAnon level conspiracy theory. So Nora and Eugene Dix attempt to leave when Nora's head gets stuck in the elevator door and she gets French Revolutioned. This was an open book test and you still failed. So with the group now on the same page, they drive to the hospital where Isabella, the pregnant lady, is located. And while on the drive, Kimberly does swerve into a ditch, which leads to Eugene being sent to the hospital and Kat being impaled by a pole after her airbag misfires. I'm gonna hold your bush when I say this, Kat. Why are you driving? And once out of the car, Rory saves little old Brian, aka Mickey from Shameless, from being run over, just before being split in half by barbed wire, which is launched at him courtesy of the exploding news van. And then we cut to the hospital where Kimberly and Thomas make it to the hospital to see that Isabella has just given birth to her baby.
Congratulations.
Who the hell are they?
And it's at this moment where Kimberly finally pauses to think and realizes Isabella never died in the pileup. What do you mean she never died in the pileup, girl? Was this all for nothing? Was this... Did we just waste our time? Cause this stupid girl with a bob decided to not check her memory to figure out if the pregnant lady was killed in a car crash. I feel like that's pretty notable if a pregnant woman dies in a car crash. Better yet, if a pregnant woman gets destroyed by an absolute log.
Kimberly.
And because Kimberly has just flopped severely, Clear searches for Eugene, whose room is filling with explosive gas. And when Clear opens up the door, a loose electric cord unplugs and lights the room on fire, exploding the room and instantly killing Clear and Eugene Dix. Okay, yeah, I totally don't care that my favorite final girl just died Midsommar style.
I bet she'd love for me to just die.
I don't care. I guess it's only right that the people with the worst last names die together, Dix and Waters. And knowing that there is one last way to solve this issue, Kimberly steals the car and drives into the lake, purposely killing herself in an attempt to break the chain. And here we cut to her being revived in the hospital, thus creating a new life, breaking the chain, allowing Kimberly to survive. At least we have one final girl, even though it's someone with a fuck-ass bob. And now we cut to the final scene where we watch a family barbecue at the Gibbons household with Kimberly and Thomas as guests, where Death does his final performance where he explodes Mickey from Shameless when he starts displaying signs of early onset white man disease when he opens up and touches the grill. Someone had to destroy him. And after recapping my third Final Destination movie, I'm gonna take a break. And you guys are gonna see me in a second, but I'll see you guys tomorrow. So, see you soon. Hey guys, took a little minute, but I'm back. All right, back to the recap, I guess. And now we cut to Final Destination 3, where we cut to May 13th, 2005, the yearly anniversary of the Flight 180 disaster. And here we follow this dysfunctional high school friend group, Wendy Christensen, her boyfriend, Jason Wise, his bestie, Kevin Fisher, and Kevin's girlfriend, Carrie Dreyer. And while there, Wendy takes pictures of her classmates and their stupid Chungus lives. Wendy is eventually peer pressured into riding the Devil's Flight roller coaster, which she eventually has a vision of it derailing, killing her and every passenger on the ride. And once back in reality, she is kicked off the ride after causing a fight to break out. Leave it to the local fair to bring out the world star entertainment we all need. The last local fair I can think of in my hometown was fully shot up. America. What can I say, guys? However, they do force Jason and Carrie to suffer through the ride, which inevitably derails.
Everything will be good.
Even though what triggered the crash was the pervert dropping his camera onto the ride, and yet the pervert was not on the ride. Make that make sense. And this means that the survivors of the crash are Ashley and Ashlyn, Final Destination's very own versions of Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie. Frankie, the pervert, Lewis, the alpha male, derogatory, Ian, the drug dealer from Ginger Snaps, Erin, the cool alternative girlfriend of Ian, Harry, and Julie, Wendy's ungrateful little sister, Kevin, and Wendy, our visionary, our cool final girl who I absolutely love. And if she dies, I'm killing myself. And Death wastes no time beginning a side quest of killing teenagers, this time beginning with Ashley and Ashlyn. Yes, our final girls, or so I wish. And now this death is in fact the worst death of them all because we watch them get burned alive while locked in tanning beds that are basically coffins. Who Whose idea was this? What man in the writer's room said, let's do this to the woman? Death is a misogynist. And I will say that these girls' deaths being so insanely graphic is just a sign of the 2000s, because movies were really just taking every excuse to graphically torture young women who fit the beauty standard. Because men who were directing these movies were mad that they couldn't get with the women, so therefore they graphically tortured them, and then they got mad at the woman for being offended that they were being graphically tortured on screen. I think it's a gross thing to do, and I haven't seen a movie in a very long time do something as crazy as that. Why are Ashley and Ashlyn getting by far the worst death inside of the entire series? They were really nice. And then we cut to the funeral service for the girls, and Wendy decides to flash the audience when she whips out a printed photo of Abraham Lincoln. And then on top of that, she pulls out another printed photo. This photo, you guessed it, is of 9/11. Yes. Yes. Y'all don't want to talk about 9/11.
Well, you don't want to hear about 9/11.
Also, why do you got printed photos of these people? Why do you have printed photos of Abraham Lincoln and 9/11? And she conveniently has these photos because she claims that Lincoln was always meant to survive his 1861 assassination because he was meant to die in 1865, and 9/11 was always meant to happen. Don't clip that, Fox News. I don't know if I want that on the internet. And next on the list is Frankie, the Sigma pervert who gets an engine fan to shred his brains, which has already been fried due to his porn addiction. That man was a freak. And with the death of Frankie, Wendy realizes that the clues to their deaths are located in the photos she took of them while at the carnival. She discovers this because the girls have a picture where they look as though they're a little bit on fire, and Frankie has a photo where his head is standing right next to a fan. And with these hints in hand, Wendy goes to Lewis, who believes he is invincible until his head is crushed by two weights, Eiffel towering his face. See, get a load of this guy. And while there, Wendy saves Ian, but in doing so, Aaron's skull is in fact blasted by a nail gun. We just lost the hottest bisexual baddie in this entire movie series. And this obviously traumatizes her boyfriend Ian, who decides that this is somehow Wendy's fault and is now creating a plan to get revenge on this innocent girl and her stupid Chungus digital camera, which, I'm not gonna lie, if this happened to me, I'd be ripping that shit out of her hand and stomping on it right in front of her face. And then we cut to the county fair where Julie gets dragged by the neck by a horse but survives when Kevin cuts the noose, saving Julie, and death moves on to the next unknown survivor, this being Perry. Yes, Perry is a survivor who is then impaled by an American flag. God, I love America. And now death is focused on killing Kevin, who almost gets blown up in flames, but Wendy saves him. Yes, she does. Finally, Wendy is next, and she suspects that Ian will be her killer due to her only photo being with Ian. Yes, but she realizes that she misinterpreted this hint because she sees a pile of fireworks begin to activate and launch at Wendy, who escapes these shots, and instead, they fly towards Ian, who somehow survives this barrage of missiles. And arrogantly exclaims that he is untouchable, which is completely untrue because those missiles go and hit a cherry picker which falls onto Ian, eradicating him from this plane of existence. And what this ends up telling us is that death is still present because he has restarted the cycle, and Julie is next on the list. And then we fast forward to 5 months later on an NYC subway car. And Wendy almost gets off the subway, but is ambushed by her sister getting on the train, and for some weird reason, she continues to skip her stop to chat with her sister, until she notices that Kevin is also sitting at the other end of the car, which triggers a second vision of the train derailing due to a rat eating a Twix bar, killing everybody else in the train. So Wendy tries to get off the train after this vision, but is a little bit too late because the train is already in motion and the final stop is death. Anyways, let's fast forward to 2009, my least favorite era of Final Destination because Final Destination 4 sucked. Sorry, this movie was just so Dad Rock America coded and it wasn't for me. I mean, to go from Final Destination 3, where we're on a carnival with the girls, to whatever this is, sorry, but you lost me. And we start this era at the McKinley Speedway with Nick O'Bannon and his dumb little friend group watching a knockoff NASCAR race where the race cars malfunction, launching them into the audience. That's what happens. I'm not happy with this movie. Also, what makes this all the more unsettling is the egregious amount of Pepsi product placement in not only this scene, but the entire movie. Some would say it's a little bit sinister. And Nick finally wakes up and directs him, his friends, a couple of angry strangers, and a neo-Nazi to escape the stadium before the crash takes place. Now, why are we saving this man? Why do we care? And after the crash takes place, Nadia, the first to perish, gets hit by the star of the hit movie Rubber's long-lost twin brother, a tire. Which is the fastest death has ever taken to begin his revenge. And now we do need to talk about the CGI in this movie. It is genuinely the worst CGI I've seen in a movie in a very long amount of time. We had G-Force come out at the same time as this movie. And I get it, G-Force is about hamsters, but those hamsters look damn good. And then we cut to the memorial service where Carter Daniels, the neo-Nazi from the crash, calls the security guard the N-word.
Nobody lives forever.
Hey, there's no need for that, man.
Back off, you fucking freak.
And then blames him for not letting him willingly walk into the burning building where his wife was already turned into a human smash burger and fried to completion. Now, because Carter, the evangelical, is angry at the security guard, he decides to place a burning cross in George's lawn to prove how much God loves him, I guess? I don't know, I'm not religious, so I don't know what this means. But his plan to show God's love backfires when Carter gets stuck to his moving car, which ends up exploding, killing him with fire. Now that is Christian love right there. And after this, Samantha, the tampon mommy, eventually meets her end when a lawnmower launches a rock into her head. I really don't know what she did to deserve this. She just put tampons in her kids' ears. And with this, Nick becomes suspicious of all these deaths and discovers that there were actually other visionaries who eventually met their bizarre ends. Nick and his girlfriend inform George, the security guard, about this, and he's an instant believer, leading to the three of them heading to Andy's workplace to tell him he's next to die. But he ignores their claims and is launched through a chain-linked fence by a flying oxygen tank. And Death eventually moves on to Hunt, who's cosplaying Percy Jackson at the bottom of the pool, with his ass stuck in the pool drain, while Janet's head is stuck in the car ceiling window, making her look as though she is a transformer. And Laurie eventually saves Janet from being decapitated by crashing her car into her car, freeing her from the car wash of death and despair. But just as she saves Janet, Hunt's colon is sucked through the pool drain and his hemorrhoids are sprayed across the entirety of the public pool. What the fuck? Like, genuinely, the most insane death in this entire movie series. What do you mean this man just had his large intestines prolapsed and shot across a public pool? With blood and shit. Okay, we're done. We are done. Let's sit with that.
Okay, they finished all over me.
And with Janet saved, Nick believes he has broken the chain, so Janet and Laurie decide to go for a movie day. Nothing bad's gonna happen, right? And during this outing though, Nick discovers that the cowboy man present at the crash actually survived and is currently in the hospital. But Nick is a little bit too late because once he arrives, the ceiling falls in on the cowboy man, killing him instantly. And now this does kind of ruin the vibe, but as Nick and George leave the hospital, the vibe is ruined even more when George gets a vision of the movie theater Laurie and Janet are at, burning to the ground full-on Inglourious Bastard style. But to top it all off, after the vision, George is steamrolled by an oncoming ambulance. So we got a vision for the two girls, but we didn't get a vision for George. Is Death also racist? Because I wanted him to be the final girl. And now here is where I'm gonna have to pause the YouTube video. I'm not really sure why the girls still went through with this movie day, because Janet, your boyfriend's colon, got turned inside out, full on pink sock style. And here you are, craving an Auntie Anne's pretzel?
Okay, whoever said that, you're fucking banned, actually.
And regardless, Nick saves Lori and Janet from the explosion, and 2 weeks later, to the day, they go out for a cafe date, where they meet their end by a semi-truck slamming right through the window. Finally, the movie is over. Let's get on to Bloodlines. We've suffered enough. And finally, we reach 2024. Here we see Stephanie Reyes, the granddaughter of Iris Campbell, who is beginning to flunk school because of boys? Or maybe girls. It's actually due to her having a reoccurring nightmare of her grandmother's premonition of the Skyview Tower collapsing. And in search of answers about her grandmother, she returns home where we meet her brother Charlie, who takes her to visit her extended family, Uncle Howard, Auntie Brenda, Eric, Julia, and Bobby. Yes. And here Stephanie decides to ask about Granny Iris, which pisses off Howard because ever since the fall of the tower, and I'm not talking about 9/11, Grandma Iris became extremely paranoid about death and raised her kids to fear death until CPS took them away and they never spoke again. Damn, I'm sorry Iris, but I'd super nanny your ass too.
You guys are in a crisis. I'm on my way.
You were doing nothing good. But Stephanie is determined and gets Iris's address, which she drives to, and Grandma's crib looks a little like Shrek's swamp if Michael Bay designed it. So, who let Granny become an architect? Regardless, we get to meet Iris, and she seems to be 2 steps away from death's door, but she tells Stephanie that in 1968, she had a vision of the tower falling, and again, not that tower, and she stopped the tower from falling, ruining Death's plan. And this disruption has led to a generational long beef with Death, which has taken decades, because there were so many survivors that went on to have families which should have never existed, and have since passed away. Now, Iris feels as though she has to pass this knowledge off to Stephanie because of her visions, so she hands her a book filled with her secrets, but Stephanie rejects this future, so Iris follows her outside, hands her the book, even with all the signs that she is showing that death is outside of the home. And here, Iris gives us her final statement, that seeing is believing, before giving Stephanie a very hands-on lesson about death. Whoa, your grandma's kind of metal though, Stephanie. Stephanie, I think your grandma's kind of hot. And cut to Iris's funeral where, surprise, surprise, Stephanie's estranged mother, Darlene, shows up to the lively party. And once the funeral comes to an end, Death continues his plans and kills Howard by decapitating him with a lawnmower, turning his brain into a Hailey Bieber smoothie. Oh, I just want to suck it up. We also discover that Eric gives himself a honorable tattoo honoring his father. Wow. That's a man who loves his daddy. And now here we move on to Howard's eldest son, Eric, who is sentenced with closing up his job alone, which is already bad enough, but his tattoo parlor ends up catching on fire, and then his nose piercing ends up getting caught on the fan, and he almost gets hung by the nose. But by some sheer luck, he ends up surviving. And Stephanie finds Eric walking along the street and attempts to predict his death, but she ends up predicting Julia's death when she is hit by a soccer ball thrown into a trash can and then ultimately dropped inside of a garbage truck.
Take a hint and leave us alone because death's not coming for our family.
Leading her to being crushed to death like a piece of trash in the Wall-E cinematic universe. And now I know why you must be wondering why Julia was killed before Eric. Well, that's because Eric isn't Howard's biological son. Brenda was cheating on him on the low. Brenda, that's not a good look. Don't be a woman in a man's field of work. And in hopes of finding answers to this mysterious evil killing the family, they decide to go to Hope River Hospital to meet this mysterious person with the initials JB. Y'all, I think we're gonna meet Justin Bieber. Turns out JB actually just stands for William Bloodworth, which doesn't really make sense because JB doesn't stand for WB, but whatever. Now, prior to this movie, most people believed that William Bloodworth was actually the physical manifestation of death, but here it is confirmed that he is actually a fellow survivor. In fact, he was the child who Iris Campbell had actually saved in her premonition, making him the final survivor of the Tower tragedy. This means a lot to me, actually. It really does. It actually does. I think it's actually such a good twist. And here he tells the family that they have 2 options for survival. Either take a life and claim its remaining lifespan, or take your chances with dying and reviving yourself. And this ends up enlightening Eric and Bobby to try the latter by forcing Bobby to have an allergic reaction to peanuts. But they end up beginning this self-murdering process in a room with an MRI machine, which Eric ends up accidentally turning on. Eric and Bobby's allergic reaction eventually becomes severe, but just at that time, the MRI machine exceeds the limit and begins magnetically dragging items across the room, the most notable of which being Eric's pierced penis. Think about that. And now this extreme force turns the MRI machine into a glory hole of anguish when it magnetically suction cups Eric's body to the hole, giving him a full body circumcision. And by that I mean it removes his skin. Eventually, Bobby gets his hands on his EpiPen and heals himself, but is quickly killed by a spare slinky from the vending machine down the hall. What am I supposed to do? And with the better half of the family decimated, Stephanie, Charlie, and Darlene head to Iris's home because apparently it's safe. Even though at the beginning of the movie, we literally saw death almost catch the home on fire. The only reason why that building is safe was because of Iris. And regardless, they get to the house and we sadly see the home explode just as Darlene and Charlie arrive at the door. And this explosion ends up knocking the RV into a pond where Stephanie begins to drown. And while this ends up happening, Darlene is able to save Charlie from being crushed, but this ends up leading to Darlene being crushed by a lamppost herself.
I'm gonna stay alive as long as...
So now we're down to Stephanie and Charlie. And Charlie eventually makes it to his sister just as she passes away from drowning, but he is able to resuscitate her, thus breaking the chain and freeing them from death. They actually won. And a week later, while preparing for Charlie's prom day, Stephanie pricks her finger, much like Iris did on the day of the tower falling. Things are getting a little bit suspicious, everybody. And then we see an old lady from the hospital drop a penny, much like that fugly little Chungus child dropping the penny off of the tower. All right. Guys, I'm starting to get a little bit scared. And then that penny ends up dropping in between the cracks from the train tracks at the beginning of the movie. Oh, we're screwed. And on top of that, Charlie's prom date's dad mansplains to the siblings that they technically didn't revive Stephanie because you can't technically bring someone back from the dead just by giving them CPR. We're just finding that out now. Cool.
We're gonna have to come over to your house and kill you.
And then a train is derailed by the penny and it launches into a suburban neighborhood, destroying the street and eventually launches some large lumber right onto Stephanie and Charlie, killing them instantly. Much like the lumber did in Final Destination number 2. And everybody, that is the end to this Final Destination timeline. However, I do want to add, now that Iris's bloodline is technically finished, does that mean Mr. Bloodworth's bloodline is next? And if so, does that mean our next movie is going to be about Mr. William Bloodworth escaping death? Because if so, I want to see that on the big screen. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I had a lot of fun making this. It was probably one of my longest recordings I've ever had to do, but regardless, it was a fun one because I finally got to watch the Final Destination movies because I had never seen them ever in my life. Kinda gagged. I will say, number 4 and 5, my least favorites by far, but 3 and Bloodlines, ooh, 3 and Bloodlines, those movies cooked. Those movies are so good. And Bloodlines, you were such a good movie, especially for a movie that is a sequel that came out a decade after the last movie. Regardless, I really enjoyed watching these movies and I really enjoyed making this timeline because the timeline of this movie series, genuinely insane. I'm also working on a podcast right now that is currently going to be recapping historic events, but in a more comedic way. So I'll tell you guys when that drops, but right now it's still in production. But regardless, thank you so much for watching. I had such a fun time making this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I'll have another video, maybe 2 weeks. Have a good day. See you soon. Bye!